our story, you know, about South Africa with the delegation being stopped in Poland. You remember a few days ago, South African diplomatic delegation was heading to Ukraine and they were forced to stop at Polish airports in Warsaw, and they were forced to be searched. Something that we've never seen in a boss. Doesn't happen with a diplomatic body. You don't just search them. It was very humiliating. And they were stopped at the airport in Warsaw for about 24 hours, over 120 people on board in a very difficult condition, very humiliating once more. So we're going to try to find out what were the reason perhaps for that. Was this premeditated? Did the South African not respect the way of the Polish, or was there something really specific that they wanted to do? Or was there a message Poland wanted to send, a very strong message to South Africa? So we're going to watch somebody very interesting. His name is Scott Reiter. He's a very interesting figure. Scott Reiter is an American author, a former United States Marine Corps intelligence officer, former United States Special Commission weapon inspector. Reiter served as a junior military analyst during Operation Desert Storm. So he's somebody very, very equipped. He knows exactly what he's talking about. Worked again as an intelligence officer. So who's best to tell us clearly about what's happened? Let's watch.
Well, I mean, first of all, we have to, there's a part that's left unsaid in your story. I will bet you a dime to a dollar that the vast majority of the personnel on that airplane looked more like you and less like me. Mm-hmm. All right. Poland is one of the most racist nations on the planet. The Polish people despise black people, despise them, hate them. We know this because when the Russians went into Kiev, there were a lot of African students studying in Ukrainian universities who had to flee. And they went to the Polish border and they wouldn't be let in. The Poles were like, nah, you ain't coming in here. We don't let people that look like you in Poland. Blatantly racist. So,
do you remember that? Do you remember when the war started in Ukraine and many students from Africa, from various African countries, were trying to flee Ukraine, trying to reach out to Poland, which was the nearest border. And many of them were stopped at the border. They refused them entry. Yes. You remember that. Many Ukrainians were let into the country very easily with no issue. But African nationals were stopped. They asked them to return to Kiev in spite of the danger that they incurred. Let's watch.
Now, they talk about these, they lack the proper certificates or the proper certifications, etc. I don't know. Gosh, when Joe Biden makes an unannounced visit to Poland, and of course, no American president flies alone. There's going to be a C-5 aircraft landing with, armored, sedans and Secret Service guys full of guns, none of which are registered. I'll tell you why they're not registered. Because the security protocol for the President of the United States is classified top secret. That means the composition of his security detail is not to be known by anybody. So we're not going to admit what we have in this vehicle, what this guy's carrying, or anything. We don't tell the Poles any of that stuff because they don't have a need to know. We will never let them know. Now, when was the last time they strip searched the Secret Service agents of the United States of America? The answer is never.
Very interesting. When is the last time they stripped search the Secret Service of the United States of America?
The answer is never. And so what we have here is a double standard. Poland is upset with South Africa for a number of reasons.
Okay. Poland is upset at South Africa for a number of reasons. Which ones?
One, South Africa is not going to arrest Vladimir Putin when he arrives in Pretoria for the BRICS summit.
South Africa is not going to arrest Putin. Interesting.
Even though that the International Criminal Court has issued a warrant for his arrest based upon baseless allegations of child kidnapping and I forget what the other one is, but they've accused him of two things that are just ludicrous. But Poland and Ukraine and other nations have said he must be arrested the moment he lands in South Africa because South Africa signed the accords that bring this up. And South Africa went, nah, we ain't going to do that. And so the Poles are angry. So this is retaliation, simple. The other thing is BRICS.
So it's retaliation. They're not happy with the fact that South Africa has been very passive with Vladimir Putin. Number one, not condemning the story of Ukraine. Number two, even though they had a warrant of arrest against Putin with the accusation in Ukraine, South Africa clearly will not arrest Vladimir Putin, who's a real partner in his arrival in South Africa for the summit of the BRICS. So they don't like that. They're very upset. They're saying certainly, yes, but you guys signed the agreement of the ICC. You said you're part of the ICC. Therefore, you are obliged to comply with the policies, which are stipulate that whenever somebody is wanted by the ICC, you as a country, you participant of the ICC are obliged to arrest that person and send him to The Hague. And this is clearly not happening.
South Africa is an original member of BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Economic Forum, that's actually rapidly growing. At the BRICS summit, which is taking place in South Africa, by the way, 19 nations have applied this year for membership.
19 nations have applied for BRICS this year. Unbelievable.
Iran, others, Egypt, Turkey, the whole world. And what it means is that South Africa is part of a movement that's gravitating away from the G7, NATO, Poland, Ukraine, and trying to live their lives free of the interference of the United States. So Poland's exacting their revenge. Now, here's the other thing I'll put out there. Poland didn't do this without instructions. You see, because the Poles aren't in the business of doing this on their own. The Poles were told by the United States, we'd like you to rough up the South African delegation.
Wow. The Poles were told by the United States, we'd like you to rough up the South African government?
Send them a signal. And the Poles went, sure, we can do that because we're racist. We have no problem. Because we're going to enjoy doing this because these are black people and we don't like black people. And so we're really going to have a good time doing this. And they did. But to think that the Poles woke up in the morning and said, let's go irritate the government that's hosting the BRICS forum that can have an economic impact on our future. Most sane people go, that's not what we want to do, especially if we want to get BRICS to change their mind. What we'd like to do is actually treat these guys well, and maybe on the return trip, invite them in for some, borscht and vodka and, sing songs and have a good time and bond with them so that the next time we sit down and say, hey, we have concerns about X, Y, and Z, they'll say, those Poles are good guys. So, yeah, we're going to sit down and listen to them. You know what's going to happen the next time somebody brings up Poland and South Africa? They're going to say those are racist people, the most racist people in Europe, second only the Ukrainians in terms of their racism. And they're also recognized as American stooges because this didn't happen without America giving a direct order, rough up the South Africans.
So this is very interesting insights. I don't know what you think about this. I just retain the fact that he said no American Secret Service would get searched at any airport because that's basis. They will not allow you to know what material, what guns, what protection they have for the United States of America's president. They will never do that. Okay, that's number one. Number two, he says he firmly believes that Polish are the most racist people in Europe. And the proof is in the pudding with the story of Ukraine when he started. If you remember, effectively, we saw on TV many African complaining about the treatment at the train. Many of them were stopped, asked to return where the bombs and the explosions were coming from. Yeah, despite the fact that many Ukrainians were traversing, they refused categorically to let in all the African nationals. Number three, he says they're not very happy with the fact that South Africa is very passive with Vladimir Putin, with the fact that they're not going to arrest Putin coming to the BRICS summit in August. And South Africa has been very strong about it. Naledi Pandor saying just a few days back that they're not going to change South African international policies just because America is threatening to take away AGOA. They don't like that. And number four, he says the American will instructed Poland to act in a way that is not appropriate, in a way that should send a signal to South Africa, rough them up. I mean, we all know this type of things never happen to diplomatic bodies. We know that. They don't search them. They don't. It's very simple. Like I said earlier, if there was anything necessarily wrong, I'm sure one phone call would have resolved it. You don't need over 24 hours of sitting people down in an airplane, 120 people in a plane, men and women, in such condition. I mean, think about hygiene. Think about all that. That is not acceptable. So what do you think about this? I really, really want to know what you think, your take on this. It's very interesting. We all know that this trip was not a success. It was a failure. They went to Ukraine, had a discussion with the Ukrainian president, then went to St. Petersburg when they discussed with a Russian president. And he came up with a story saying that they had already signed an agreement with Ukraine in Turkey last year. Ukraine had agreed to end the war last year in Turkey. But after the trip of Boris Johnson, Nancy Pelosi, Anthony Blinken, and Ursula von whatever that her name is in Ukraine, then the Ukrainian changed position. They said they wanted to fight. And then they asked for guns and weapons and stuff coming from Europe, which was provided to them. And that's the reason why we are where we are right now. What do you think of the Polish people? What do you think of the Polish government move? Is this a shame? If this is a shame, if this is really a shame for African people, how should Africans react in this stance? How should we stand to respect ourselves and to make ourselves respected? God bless.